to a more permanent solution of the conflict in the Middle East.
Because everywhere we have the traces of Russia, we will always have multiple threats to security. Dear friends, and these are the Ukrainian friends that are united by the Warsaw Conference, I do hope that Poland will stand with us in the fighting against this aggression. And I believe that the priorities that we have had so far will remain in force. I would like to thank the government of the Republic of Poland very much for understanding the sense of our fight and standing with us in the protection of the international law. I would like to thank you because without the safe Ukraine, we don't have safe Poland. That's why we hope that we will have a continuation of the Polish support, especially the military one, our anti-rocket systems, fighters, artillery, drones, and everything that helps us protect skies and save human beings, as well as the pace of the delivery of these arms, is of key importance. The support for Ukraine also means the secure supplies for each country in Europe. It's in your interest that Ukraine is safe, so that Russia doesn't enter into Polish territories and the Polish children will not die while protecting their homeland. We would also like to ask you for political support, especially as far as the Ukrainian accession to the EU and NATO is concerned. Within 1 month, we will have European Council session and we will discuss there the initiation of the accession of the Ukraine to the European Union. We jointly need to take care of the fact that neither veto stops us from this decision. The political support for not only Ukraine but also entire free world is needed. It will be the proof of our solidarity and gratitude for Ukrainian soldiers that are giving away their lives under the blue and yellow flag, which is so important for not only Poland but also European Union. And in the end, I would like to strengthen the fact that the Polish participation of the rebuilding of Ukraine is very important. This rebuilding is taking place right now. We are extremely grateful for the Polish intention to participate in this rebuilding. I would like to thank Madam Minister Emilewicz for being the ambassador of the Polish business in the activity of these Polish companies in Ukraine. And I would also like to strengthen the fact that today's situation with the blockade of local group of Polish transport businesses that have participated for 2 weeks so far also shows how easy this goodwill and this willingness of participation of this rebuilding project can be blocked at the crossing of the border with Ukraine, as Polish Ukrainians and foreign transport companies were locked there just because somebody decided to block the border just for their own business profits, giving conditions that are not able to be met. Ladies and gentlemen, the border needs to be open and nobody can be deciding about this. Our joint border should unite us, not separate us, especially because this is also the border between the European Union and Ukraine, especially today when Ukraine is fighting against aggressor and when Russia destroy the possibility of trading on the sea trails, for example. That's when this border should be resistant to all the blockades. I deeply believe that we'll find a solution in this situation, and the strategic interest won't be discussed by these corporate interests. I believe that everybody will be profitable because of this, and when Ukraine wins, we will jointly build an ally in the United Europe. I deeply believe that today's discussion will make us aware of this deep strategic character of our bilateral relationships that will be standing together in order to combat the evil and to to hold the Russian aggressor accountable for their crimes. Only then the world will be safe and our children could enjoy the safety, the prosperity, which is my great wish to you. Thank you very much for your attention. Thank you, Mr. Ambassador. Now I would like to invite Madam Secretary of State and the Government Plenipotentiary for Polish-Ukrainian Development Cooperation, Madam Minister Jadwiga Emilewicz. Mr. Professor, Mr. Ambassador, Mr. Minister, ladies and gentlemen, as we could hear, we meet here for the 5th time. But when Mr. Professor was organizing this meeting, he was hoping that it would be the first and the last one at the same time. Unfortunately, the war that started in February last year is still on, and to be honest, we need to be discussing honestly here the horizons of its end are not to be met quickly. And even though we wish Ukraine a success and quick victory, we know that we need to stay ready for a long march. That's why we have such meetings, such panels. I believe that they will be permanent and we will be discussing in full consciousness about long-term policy that go beyond short-term politics, that it will endure, and even though there are some changes of political situation both in Poland and Ukraine, they will remain. I'm happy because when we were talking for the first time with Mr. Professor, the idea standing behind this Warsaw Conference was to proclaim the panel of experts both from Poland and Ukraine who will be able to discuss more behind these political conflicts on reality of now and future, on difficult topics of culture, politics, etc. And they will be able to give some good and profitable for both nations solutions to politics. I believe that we will be able to come across such solutions, and the Warsaw Conference will be the role for such a long-term solution. I was talking with the professor, and we believe that the support for such an idea will be met both in Warsaw and in Kiev. Today we are meeting to sum up some period. This is not a secret that the mission of some of us is finishing now. So let me give you 2 remarks. First of all, what's of key importance, regardless of parliamentary landscape in Poland, except for some exceptions, we won't find discrepancies of the Polish goals in Ukrainian politics. The majority of parliamentarians who are in today's parliament are very much convinced where is this axis of evil, who's evil, and what our position against Ukraine and Russia should be, that we should support Ukraine military and in other aspects. We should be mobilizing not only ourselves but also a European opinion, because this is not a local conflict. In fact, Russia and the Kremlin, Moscow, while attacking Ukraine, wants to attack the entire European Union, wants to shake the safety not only in the European Union but also in NATO. This is their long-term goal. So when Kiev calls to history, recalls history, it remembers that Russia was always interested in their imperial plans. The Kiev was its first goal. So we should keep it in mind. It's important in this present politics, but also in the long-term politics of Putin. Questioning the right of existence of such countries like Ukraine or Belarus also points out to Poland and its role, historic role in the history of Europe in the 19th century in relation to Ukraine and Belarus too. That's why this conflict is of strategic importance, and the situation in our region hasn't changed much since the 19th century. Since the 19th century also, we had our sovereignty, our independent ideas. And since that time, we've had a lot of politicians speaking about powerful Poland, powerful Europe. And the condition for this is the sovereignty, independency of countries like Ukraine or Belarus. And it won't change in the nearest future. As I've mentioned, today's meeting is also time for some summaries, what we've managed to work out jointly, and also some remarks for future. The first one, I think this is 178th day of my government plenipotentiary position for the Polish-Ukrainian Development Cooperation. So I recall the first days of war and the humanitarian aid that was sent from Poland to Ukraine. And I think that what has happened, and we've already repeated it for several times, but we should repeat it more and more. Support that the Polish society gave to Ukraine since the very first day of war, without the need of the political support and this, persuasion that they should do it, is unprecedented. It hasn't happened since centuries. It's a everyday, just humanitarian, human aid, but it was supported by the political actions. Almost 20% of this GDP that was directed last year makes us the second biggest donor to the Ukraine after the United States. Also, this year, this aid is still going on. We've created institutions such as Government Agency of Strategic Reserves and the Foundation of International. They are helping and they are giving aid not only from Poland, but from entire world. Poland became this logistic international hub for help to Ukraine. And it's meeting its responsibility within our allies. What's happened between Poland and Ukraine during last months is also worth mentioning, because now this is the moment to thank for those who helped us create such a good cooperation. Thanks to very good cooperation and understanding also with Mr. Ambassador, we managed to convince Ukrainian part to seize the memorandum to remove this cash circulation. So during the first months of the conflict, we were able to this moratorium, this cease of moratorium helped us, for example, the cease of this moratorium enabled us to take loans and make the capital be able to circulate. Thank you very much for this. So after returning from International Trading Bureau in Kiev, we managed, after this finish of this mission, we managed to do so. So this was the first mission, this trading and economic mission that was started in Kiev. Now we have over 1,000 operations and meetings that this international bureau organized for the Polish business with Ukrainian partners. I'm extremely proud of this, because when we are talking with our friends from the Western Europe, when I'm speaking about Polish chairmen who are so willing to go to Ukraine to missions, and there have been almost over 10 of such missions, they are really astonished. They hardly believe it. A couple of weeks ago, Mr. Ambassador of Switzerland asked me, how do we do it? Maybe we can share our experiences with Swiss chairman, because we are already able to go to Ukraine and to start our activities, and they don't believe it. That's why he's interested in it, because Polish businessmen are not worried of the war state of Ukraine. Of course, we take wise decisions, but when we go there, it's kind of safe and it's predictable. So we are not waiting for big fund structures that are being created at the moment, but Polish businessmen is trying to be present there today.
The Foreign Trade Office in Kiev is the first to mark our institutional presence in Ukraine, and as we know, another one will be open quite soon in the western part of Ukraine. I keep repeating myself, but I do it because I see many partners surprised with the new Polish framework on the insurance of export loans, a very well-known instrument to all those Polish businesses active and present in Asia or in Africa. We have a special insurance institution, KUKE, offering insurances for investment guaranteed by the state. Any company may use such insurance. However, 30% of all services and goods should be provided from Poland. That is why the offer of insurances is opened to all the countries and to all businesses. There is no special insurance account for Ukraine opened by KUKE. We have a global account, so there is no difference between insurance between Ukraine or other countries. However, our Ministry of Finance has just said that it stands ready to extend and enlarge the guarantee amount. The law entered into force in September after the signature by the Polish president. We had a meeting with Polish banks to speed things up. We asked banks to prepare loan offers that will be guaranteed or insured with KUKE. And actually banks are inspired by the customers and clients, by companies and businesses which want to invest in Ukraine. You know, in any investment venture, information is the key. The Polish Development Fund opened a platform, an information website, with the overview of all key details regarding the loans available, the insurances available, plus another Polish law, a sort of a public procurement guideline, a document with a number of valuable items of advice and information. And the guideline is available both in this portal, information portal, at the Ministry of Funds and the Ministry of Economic Development. The Polish Public Procurement Office has offered a training for all companies interested in entering the Ukrainian market and interested in bidding in the reconstruction proceedings. Let me add to that yet another element introduced over the recent months. Thank you, Minister Galver, for your support. The Ministry of Foreign Affairs signed at the UN General Assembly session in September. Well, the Polish Ministry of Foreign Affairs and the United Nations Procurement Office signed a new agreement, and the UN Public Procurement branch will soon be opened in Warsaw. And this is great news, especially that we know that public procurement processes are quite complicated, and many of them are managed by the UN Procurement Office. And with the branch in Warsaw, we will have an advantage. We know that Polish businesses have become more active in UN public procurement processes. However, it's not sufficient enough. We believe that the address of this new branch and its location in Warsaw will help Polish businesses. We also decided to upgrade the knowledge of Polish businesses on Ukrainian and UN public procurement requirements. And a series of trainings will be organized by the Polish Procurement Office since September. Apart from that, we've organized a dozen of economic missions, economic visits. Each was specific, covering a number of industries: construction, water and sanitation, logistics, warehousing. And there will be yet another one organized next week. And I'd like to highlight that last one because this is a showcase of Poland's belief in Ukrainian independence. The architectural firms and offices actually contacted us, and they requested the organization of such a mission or trip to Ukraine. In other words, Polish architects believe that the new bids will be launched for the reconstruction of Ukraine, long-term projects. And our architects are already interested in starting the negotiations and conversations with the Ukrainian Association of Architects and with large property owners or developers. They want to establish partnerships right now, and I'm actually very proud of this mission because it shows a sort of a long-term approach and proves that Poles are really deeply convinced that Ukrainians will win this war. Over recent months, my team have organized a number of meetings with local business partners in Lublin, Kraków, Katowice, but also in Mielec, Lubaczów, and Racibórz, other smaller countries, very specific small-scale meetings between exporters to Ukraine, now considering the expansion of the export activity in this country. I'd like to highlight the commitment of Polish businesses. I must say that I see how Polish businesses want to seize the potential of the Ukrainian market. And the pinnacle of our actions, Common Future Congress, held on the 21st and 22nd of September, just after the UN General Assembly session. President Andrzej Duda was present as well. It was actually held just at the peak of our grain-related tensions between Poland and Ukraine. And back then, the President of the Republic of Poland said, okay, we may have our issues regarding trade agreements and grain exports. However, this should not overshadow our strategic interests, and strategic interests are clear for both sides, for Ukraine and for Poland. The forum brought together thousands of representatives of Polish and Ukrainian businesses, and the Congress will be organized in the years to come and was actually repeated by the participants in the Polish Fair Trade Organization and the Polish Fair Trade Organization is now already preparing the event of the next year. We know that the road is quite difficult. We had a grain conflict. We have difficulties at the BCPs. We know it should be avoided. Any bottlenecks should be avoided. And transport is like a blood to our economy. We know that Poland has become a European transportation and logistics hub. We know that with the mobility package, transport businesses and Polish transport sectors have had to overcome a number of challenges and have had to meet a number of requirements. And we do realize the issues, transportation bottlenecks at the borders. And this is my call to you, Ambassador. Please show us some understanding. This has not been an easy time for the transport sector. Don't forget the new EU requirements. The bar was set very, very high. And actually, we had tough dialogues and tough conversations with the European Commission. So please be patient, show some understanding. Please be open to some constructive solutions, and let's not forget the challenges of the Polish transportation sectors that needed to be tackled and dealt with over recent years. We also have a tight loan instrument. That was the instrument adopted in 2015, and it was not used until the beginning of the war. And this tight loan instrument is not an easy solution, and the process is quite tough as well. And here I speak on behalf of Poles, of our government, and let's hope of the next government, of the administration to come. We believe that this is a very positive solution, giving Ukraine the opportunity of developing necessary infrastructure projects. However, the terms and conditions of such loan and so of such projects financed with the loan should be really clear-cut and transparent. Now, let me move on to the challenges ahead. First, internal security of Ukraine. Secondly, the relations between the EU and Ukraine. And thirdly, the relations between Poland and Ukraine. Let me start with the first one. Politicians, major economic partners of Poland and possibly of Ukraine tell us that there need to be some solutions to the lack of transparency or the persisting corruption in Ukraine. We know and we do realize that the reconstruction of Ukraine may be qualified as the second Marshall Plan. Actually, its scale and complexity will go far beyond what Europe faced in the aftermath of the Second World War. The financial effort would be so huge that it would need to include private equity. And private equity will be very prudent if there is no information on the rules applicable for recovery. Please understand us. We came the same way. Poland had the same challenges at the beginning of its political transition. First and then just when joining the EU. Right now we stand ready to support you in capacity building efforts. You need institutions which are transparent and raise no doubts among European and non-European partners. As I said, there are a lot of partners interested in Ukrainian recovery. However, they are not that much sure whether the Ukrainian economy is transparent. So the horizontal assumption of Ukrainian elite is to have a transparent state with clear rules for foreign partners. But we know that this is a lengthy and bumpy road, and we came this long way, and we are now ready with our own capabilities to support you. Now let me move on to the accession process of Ukraine to the Western world. This is a strategic interest of Poland as well. We know the accession process, and it was quite complicated before 2004. Right now it will become even more complicated. Our accession requirements were much easier today. They have been changed, and they have become even more complicated than 20 years ago. So we believe and we know that the accession will not be easy, and Ukraine needs to be prepared institutionally. And as I've just said, I will repeat again, we are ready to support Ukraine, and it's hard to find another European country with such capabilities. Poland was actually successful in its accession, and we've gathered a record of experience. We've already held a pilot training for public officers from Kiev and the surroundings, and we will host yet another group of public officials from Ukraine for another training. Plus, we've devised a one-year training program for over 100 of public officials at the central and local level. This will be conducted jointly with the European College in Natolin and the National School of Public Administration, and I do believe that the project will be continued and upheld by the next administration.
And I also believe that some key ministries will be proclaimed, for example, infrastructure of the regional policy, etc. These are the ministries that help prepare very good strategic documents for Ukraine, so that the transfer of European funds that will start next year will go smoothly, and so that these funds will be used in the most effective way. So the second important element will also need our joint big political support. Today's Warsaw Conference has a more broad view. We are also looking at this Eastern conflict, which is also influencing Ukraine. A side consequence of this conflict is the drawing Europeans' attention back from Ukraine and focusing it on the Middle East. So our joint diplomatic mission should be this accession process start in line with recommendations next year, and that it progresses not at such a pace that we know from European processes, but much faster, at least at the same pace that we could enjoy in 2004. So this joint diplomatic mission is to be carried out both on the Warsaw's side and Kiev's side. And finally, the third aspect related with our joint relationships in this economic area is very good, which is reflected by numbers, which is mentioned often during conferences. Last year, Poland became the first economic partner to Ukraine. And this joint trading exchange was even higher than China had, and these record values that with which we finished last year are really very, very astonishing. And statistical data that was shown during the first half year are even better than the last year's. So these good economic relationships should be the fundament of good political relationships in the future. So first of all, it's important to define well areas where we want to cooperate jointly. And secondly, this is my wish, and I would like to leave you with this idea. Our engagement, unprecedented, both social and political one, should position our joint political relationships on different level comparing to any other country. We have proven that we are able to cross different historical barriers or non-historical barriers in order to support the friends in need. So when we are looking for sources of inspiration during this first tragic year of war, let us have such areas of economic cooperation that are only for us, where the Polish competences or Polish economic competences are really high and that can be implemented in Ukraine. If we are able to discuss it on some political levels, and regardless of the change of political actors in Poland or in Ukraine, which will of course take place because they will be durable for many years, and this will be the foundation for a joint economic bridge that will be crossed for a long term, because we know that this political situation, regardless of conflicts that might appear somewhere globally, will not change. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Madam Minister. I would also like to thank all the people who intervened during the opening and the first part of our 5th Warsaw Conference. Ladies and gentlemen, now let's go to the report on the activities of the report of the Warsaw Enterprise Institute on Compendium of the Polish Aid to Ukraine. It will be presented by the Deputy Director of this Center of Strategic Studies, Mr. Łukasz Wojdyła. Thank you very much. I would like to thank for inviting us to this event and for the possibility of presenting our report, or maybe rather compendium, because our goal isn't to prepare the report and give only one number or just single figures which translate into the aid that Poland gave to Ukraine, because this is not possible. Of course, we have some estimates regarding the Polish GDP, the percent of the budget. However, just one number or just one value is not possible to be presented simply. I would like to start with the fact that Poland started to help Ukraine, in fact, in the first hours after the breakout of the conflict. And even some transportations of armament were sent actually the first one day before the start of the conflict. It was really of the huge scale and multi-dimensional help from both public institutions but also private companies and by individuals. So this help from individuals and public institutions meant that these public institutions informed on different websites about their aid, but these information were appearing and disappearing. And the aim of our compendium was to gather all the information together so that they don't disappear from the public information or even from the history, so that we will be able in some place to show how this aid was given, in what way, and where it is possible to give precise figures and numbers. We also wanted to keep this good opinion that Poland and Poles have in Ukraine. According to all the opinion studies in Ukraine, Poland is the nation that is mostly liked by the Ukrainians, and we believe that it will continue so. We may say that our compendium can be a kind of tool of the Polish soft power for the future to show how this aid looked like. As I've said, we wanted to show in the intersectional way the aid that we provided to Ukraine. We didn't differentiate the aid into what we've sent to Ukraine, but we've also included the aid that we were providing Ukrainian citizens who arrived in Poland actually in the first hours of this commencement of the armament conflict. The gathered information were divided into 4 parts of the aid given by the private business, by the public institutions, self-governments, and finally society, which means individuals and Polish NGOs. The aid was understood as all the actions of the self-government, business, NGOs, government, individuals that aimed at supporting Ukraine and Ukrainians. Also those who were forced to look for shelter in the Republic of Poland. The compendium, as I've said, isn't and cannot be a complex tool of all the activities of Poland. Its goal was just to show the scale of Polish aid. In our compendium, we've included almost 400 kinds of Polish aid from the 22nd of February to the end of July of 2023, 22nd of February 2022 to July 2023. It was updated for several times during this time, and we have some examples from September of October of this year. 92 actions were related with business, 79 country, 94 self-government, and 132 were included into the category society. Well, of course, as far when the values are assessed, the biggest aid was provided by the country, by the state, in a military way, because these were huge numbers, billions of zlotys. But also individual actions and this, uniform help was also included in the category society. What's interesting that this data in compendium come from open sources of information. As NGO, independent institution, we didn't have access to military or government data. That's why our information data sources come from open sources only. So it influences, the estimates of figures in compendium. We also provide sources when we give values. If we don't have such information, in most cases we were giving estimate calculation of a given help. And several examples. As I've said, there are almost 400 positions or actions of aid. So I would like to encourage you to read it by yourself. Here are just several examples taken out of the topic. For example, company Tarczyński Meat Industry that gave 40,000 packages of sausages. Polish pharmaceutical companies giving medicines and medical materials valued at 15 million zlotys by Polish companies. President of the Wałbrzych city to the president of Bolesław city, giving the energy power generator. The aid of the students and employees of University of Śląsk, but also Polish armament devices valued at 2.7 billion zloty. So these are huge numbers. The power generator was worth 90 million zloty, and this armament equipment 2.7 billion zloty. As I've said, we didn't want to give just one value. According to the German institution, at the end of June 2023, Poland was one of the biggest donors for Ukraine. The money given was 96.35 Polish billion zloty. This is the third place in the world in independent values, and the first place in the world as far as the GDP is concerned. It was 3.2% of the yearly GDP. It was being transferred in the form of different activities for both fighting Ukraine or Ukrainians who arrived in Poland. What was the difference between the Polish aid and different countries or institutions? First of all, the Polish aid we started to provide this aid from the very, very beginning of the breakout of the war. After in the first hours after the breakout, the volunteers were at the border with hot tea, with sandwiches, waiting for refugees. And on the second hand, we were sending military transportations with armament, with medical materials, etc. So the aid was really complex, and in many individuals or private companies were involved. So this joint solidarity, this impulse of our hearts was, especially in the first months, was really visible. I think each of us was aiding in that moment, and it's important to say that in the first months this aid wasn't coming from your big institutions, big donors, but from the individuals. Then the military aid, Poland was one of the first one to give military equipment, and Poland has remained and is remaining at the moment the leader as far as the heavy armament is concerned, for example, tanks, fighters, etc., so that Ukraine can carry out offense activities, not only defense ones, and also financial institutions and self-government institutions that was of key importance to keep the Ukrainian state operating, so sending money to the budget, for example, from the Polish banks. Our activities, as I've said, are the sum up of the aid that was carried out. We also wanted to promote the Polish aid in Ukraine. As I've said, this information can be used both by Polish institutions or Polish embassies, diplomatic centers. This compendium was sent to all the governments in oblasts in Ukraine, so over 500 levels of self-government in Ukraine. We've also created the website in Polish, Ukrainian and English languages, where we invite you.
The document is available in Polish and Ukrainian versions. 2 videos were also developed to promote our aid. It was prepared by the Ukrainian YouTuber, and we had more than 15,000 views on the first day of streaming. We published 2 papers in Ukrainian media on Polish aid and its scale, and on the margin of business fora, we organized seminars and workshops with businesses, journalists and NGOs and experts from Ukraine. They were held in Vinnytsia and Łódź. The report was drafted as part of the project A Friend in Need, co-financed by the Polish Ministry of Foreign Affairs. You can visit the project website for further information. Thank you very much for your attention. Thank you. Now I give the floor to Professor Jan Malicki. Thank you very much, Dr. Wojdyga. I have one comment to make. I was told, well, this is just a small report produced by the center. Actually, this is a huge report, a very comprehensive one, and congratulations. Our guests will change, so let me just give one comment. This is a query to all speakers. We are on streaming. Let's not forget that we have a translation, be translation friendly, interpreter friendly. That is why I've been slowing down. Regarding the comments by Minister Emilewicz, thank you very much for this presentation, Madam Minister. First and next, let me say that since the very start of our permanent review conference, I keep saying that we would like to complete the project. I'd like to see that there is no need to have yet another session or yet another conference. And there is an ethical value in that. In December and in January, or even in the early February 2022, I was among those who said there would be no war. I relied on many reflections and arguments, and I just thought that it would be too hard for Russia to have this war. The Russian army, according to military art, had no sufficient capabilities in any platforms, and the handbooks of the art, military art, actually precise the advantage needed for any quick victory in the field. And Russia seemed without such capabilities. And I also thought that it would not be actually profitable to Russia. However, the war started, and I made a mistake in my calculations. But I believe that once the war is over, we will assist to a shift comparable to the one of the collapse of the Soviet Union. It will be comparable. The number of those who predicted the fall of the Soviet Union had grown proportionally to the time elapsed from the collapse of the Soviet Union. And that would be the case of this war as well. Our speakers, Minister Gerber, Minister Emilevich, and Director Wojtyła mentioned refugees. I made a number of statements to journalists and to experts and to researchers from the Western world, and I had to make explanations, French, American scholars. And I just explained why this scale. And actually myself, I had to make a sort of a self-reflection on the topic. And I could sum them up in 7 key points, but let's not be afraid. I will not discuss these 7 points in detail right now. I will do that during the 6th or the 7th edition of our conference. But actually, why Poles rushed in thousands to help millions of Ukrainians? Well, actually, I know the answers. And I know the answers because I had to give those explanations to people from the Western world coming to our country and asking us these questions. The photos taken during the first days of the war would go down into the history of Polish-Ukrainian relationship, and will be included in the history books. Myself, I am a historian, and I must say that each and every one of us, starting with the President of the Republic up to down to the average citizen, we need to take care of these relationships. It's not that we've achieved everything that was achievable, and it's not that we can say today 100% that our relations, Polish-Ukrainian relations, will be as they were in February, March, April, May, or August, or June 2022. They have changed already, so everybody needs to contribute and to take care of those relationships. Both sides, Polish side, the Polish side, and the Ukrainian Polish sides, their ambassador, need to take care of those relationships. We have millions of Poles who got involved in helping Ukrainians, and we have millions of Ukrainians who received help in Poland. And there are plenty of statements about that, both in Polish and Ukrainian media, and we need to take care of the health of these relationships. Because we have some housekeeping rules, we will stick to them, and now let's
Ladies and gentlemen, please take your seats so that we can continue today's conference. The second and the last part of today's conference will be the discussion panel. So I would like to invite everyone to take their seats so that we can start.
Szanowni Państwo, ja pozwolę sobie już...
Ladies and gentlemen, let me start the second part. We are in the Chancellery of the Prime Minister, and today we are participating in the 5th Warsaw Conference, the Permanent Working Review Conference on Support to Ukraine. Ladies and gentlemen, the second part of our program consists of a discussion panel. I can see that our panelists are taking their seats, so I would also invite you to do so. Ladies and gentlemen, we will start a debate entitled Russia, Ukraine, Middle East soon. The chair of this debate will be Madam Anna Maria Dyner from the Polish Institute of Foreign Affairs, and Mr. Adam Bernhardt from Center of Strategic Studies will participate in it. The former minister to the Polish embassy in Israel, Mr. Włodzimierz Marciniak, the former ambassador in Russia, Mr. Tomasz Orłowski from the Minister of Foreign Affairs, and another representative of the Eastern Studies Institute. I would like to give the floor to the host. Thank you very much. Thank you for introducing our speakers. It gives us 2 to 3 minutes more for them to speak. I would like to thank you for inviting me, and I would like to thank our speakers for accepting the invitation for in this debate. We will combine 2 themes today: the Middle East topic with Ukrainian topic, with some other elements, not only Russia, but I will talk about this later on. The program that I've prepared for today is the following. We will focus on 2 thematic blocks, the description of the situation, and in the second part, kind of forecast how the situation will develop, and of course, in line with Mr. Malicki, Mr. Director, depending on how much time we need, at least 15 minutes. We will book this time for Q&A session, so please prepare your questions. And now let me start with the topic related with the situation in Ukraine, because this is the Warsaw's conference topic. Mr. Adam, the first question is to you. First of all, the institute you are working for, the evaluation of the situation both in the front line, but also the political situation, because that determines Polish-Ukrainian relationships. How much the war in Israel, or rather in the Middle East, will be taking the attention back from Ukrainian conflict. I mean the United States, most of all. Thank you very much for inviting me to this panel. This question is very broad, or maybe even 2 to 3 questions, and you have only 6 minutes to reply to them. Okay, so let's start. As far as the situation in the front line is concerned, let's have a look on the map after 2022, when the dynamics of changes was very, very high. In the beginning, Russians managed to take over territories in the north of the country. In the south, in the Khersoński Oblast, they managed to go to the right bank of the Dnieper River. Then the Ukrainians managed to take over these territories, and 2023 didn't result in changing of the front line. The situation is kind of stopped now, which was reassured by General Załużny. The Russian counteroffensive, this spring-summer counteroffensive, was a failure. And this military dynamics, of course, influences these two elements you've asked me about: intra-political dynamics as well as the scope of the support of Ukrainian by the Western countries. So the first intra-political question. We may say that the politics returned to Ukraine after first months of the war, after consolidation of the society around President Zelensky, almost a 100% support for him. We have more and more complex situation now. On one hand, Ukrainians think that they will win this war. They are convinced that Ukraine shouldn't have any compromise. But at the same time, the support for President Zelensky is finishing, not only because of lack of military successes, but also because of corruption affairs or different pathologies, let me say, that were brought into the light as far as the spending of international aid funds is concerned. So now we can see that the Ukrainian society is kind of tired. There is no strong opposition. There is no opposition because former President Petro Poroshenko or Yulia Tymoshenko or traditional opposition Ukrainian forces don't have potential to regain power in Ukraine, to propose Ukraine any alternative to Zelensky's presidency. But the problem is, from the Zelensky's point of view, is that the world or the policy doesn't like vacuum. So we are waiting for an opposition to be formed, opposition to Zelensky, of course. More and more often we can hear that this will be military forces that will be the opposition. The combat say so, or present leaders say so. So the conflict between the president and the chief of armed forces that is growing will be destabilizing Ukraine, especially if Ukraine will be forced to step back by Western nations. And now, what's the consequences of this on military aid for Ukraine? It also has to do with the frontline situation. We are willing to, we like helping those who are winning, who can translate our aid into military successes. The problem starts when we don't have military successes, so there will be more and more voices saying that this war doesn't make sense and supporting Ukraine leads nowhere, which will be weakening Ukraine and also strengthening Russia, because lack of support for Ukraine to continue war, especially in the dynamics of the situation in the United States. Because nowadays there is a growing probability that because of the situation in Ukraine, the support for President Biden will be going down, and the election will take place next year in the beginning of 2025. Donald Trump will regain power in the United States, and he's saying that he will finish the war in one day only, and he doesn't go into detail. It means a very difficult year or 1.5 years for Ukraine that is conscious of the fact that the war will not finish in the following months, and Russia won't be ready to go on compromise. And on the other hand, Ukrainians are not ready. Society isn't ready for compromise, and all the compromises that Zelensky would accept would result in anarchization of the internal situation in Ukraine and exchange of external conflict into the internal one. Who don't, in Ukraine, especially these members of Ukraine who are not able to accept any compromise. And now the question of Israel, the situation of the conflict in the Middle East will be also turning our attention back from Ukrainian conflict. Thank you very much. 6 minutes is not too much. Now, Mr. Ambassador Maciej Kozłowski, Adam has mentioned situation in Israel. All the eyes are turned into Israel now, what's going on over there. So I would like to ask you a short question. First of all, how, in your opinion, the military and political situation in Israel look like, and what will be the following steps of military actions? And all the world, of course, is looking at it. Is Israel able to have a long-term war, and what are the goals of Israel?
Ostatniego pytania.
Let me start with your last question. I believe this is the key one. That's why I will start with your last question. The declared goal of the Israeli government and the Israeli society is the liquidation of Hamas, sweeping Hamas away, and I don't think this is achievable. Hamas is a hybrid body, including military, social, and political structures, plus ideology. And this cannot be destroyed even with the state-of-the-art missiles. However, what is achievable is the destruction of Hamas military infrastructure. I will not delve into the military effort. Actually, the information becomes a part of the warfare, and we do not have the exact information about the situation on the front line, and we know that nobody tells the full truth. However, we may assume that the Hamas land military infrastructure will be destroyed. 160 square kilometers, 40 to 100 kilometers, that's the Gaza Strip. And this is feasible. This infrastructure can be destroyed. Let's not forget about 500 kilometers of underground tunnels. That's a different question. If these tunnels can be destroyed, I don't know. It is achievable, but the perspective is much more difficult. Can Hamas be destroyed as a military, social, and ideological structure? This is not achievable, I believe. Even if Hamas in its present form is destroyed, it will be reborn in a form of a different extreme Islamic organization, as we saw it in the past when Al-Qaeda was replaced by ISIS and by other extremist organizations. The goals. Well, let's not forget the internal development in Israel. The government of Benjamin Netanyahu and the society seem to have different goals. We know that Netanyahu will stand and will be held accountable in justice. And actually, the defense against the accusation may be an overarching goal for him. So in order to be out of the reach of the justice system, Netanyahu may want this war to last with all political and social consequences. 300,000 people drafted fighting will definitely undermine the Israeli economy. The value of shekel has gone down. The value of shares of Israeli companies has gone down. Well, in a way, it is detrimental to the Israeli economy, but Israel is expensive enough, is rich enough and wealthy enough to afford this cost. And without political changes in Israel, there will be no significant shift in the conflict. And we can draw here the parallel with Ukraine. I would not see a solution to a stalemate between Israel and Palestine. I believe that deep changes, political changes of Israel are a precondition for any solution. Now, let me move to our former ambassador to Russia. And what are the goals of Russia then? Since the very beginning of the war, the declared goals of demilitarization or denazification of Ukraine seemed to be added to justify the military action. What has changed? What are the goals of Russia right now? What happened after Prigozhin rebellion? Are there any changes in the Russian elite? Are there any changes in the balance of power between them? Or are the representatives of the special security forces still the dominating power within the Russian elite, or are there any other groups? Thank you very much for your question, madam. Well, I can only guess, at least in part, the Russian general military staff does not publish any plans. That is why we cannot identify the military goals. We can only judge from the official statements made by Russian politicians, and this is a guesswork. But we may assume that the statements are in a way tuned to the evolving military situation. Russians have always used this term of special military operation, and they did it on purpose. This is because of the Russian propaganda, and this is also for practical purposes. The term describes a type of political and military operation. And based on that, we may assume that the goal for Russia was to change people in power in Ukraine. The tactics, the methodology may depend on the perspective, but usually that could be defined as the initial goal. And let me quote one joke. Putin will not settle down until Medvedchuk becomes the president. This is, an intellectual shortcut, but reflecting the very essence of thinking, Russian thinking, behind their political decisions. So for them, this war is a special military operation. The quick takeover of Kiev and the quick change in power. But this did not happen. And a long-term process usually requires the change of goals and resources. So right now, the goal of Russia is to have a war, whatever the outcome, with the best achievable outcome. So for how long? That will be the next question. Let me move to the next level of reflection, like socio-cultural level of reflection. With that in mind, we may assume that the war is devised to, right now, Russia runs the war to avoid sanction, retribution, or any penalties. So the Russian military effort will be involved as long as it is possible in order to get the impunity in return. The Russian national idea or ideal for me would be the ideal of impunity shared by everybody. The question is how it is achievable. Is it achievable through values, through military efforts? The regime has its goals, and there is a priority of goals, and at the top, you have this ideal of impunity, avoiding any just or fair retribution. It's not only about avoiding criminal prosecution, it's also about avoiding any consequences. Let's just listen to the political opponents of Putin and Russian political refugees. They will tell you the same thing. They would say Russians do realize that Russia has committed a lot of crimes, but Russia does not want to pay. Russians don't want to pay for it. That is why Russians will support those who make an illusion, at least, that the solution at the end will be the one when any penalty will be avoided. Now let me move to the Russian political establishment. In the incoming months, there will be a new development, a sort of a referendum on the renewal of his mandate as Putin, as the president, a new procedure to prolong the term of office of Vladimir Putin and to give him even more legitimacy. And I'm speculating right now. Maybe there are some political divides within the establishment. Maybe there are some who usually would support the referendum, and the referendum has already a well-known outcome. On the one hand, those people would say, we need a referendum in order to strengthen the legitimacy of Putin's power. And on the other hand, within the establishment, you can find a group of those who would be for more repression, for more war, for more renationalization. Well, the whole repressive package needed in order to strengthen the same Putin's legitimacy with different means. We know that from the recent history of Russia. Don't forget what we witnessed in 1996 and 7. So here there may be a starting point for a political divide or conflict. You probably know the jokes about Putin's death. And Peskov receives the message that Putin is dead and saying that there will be a new Putin. Someone else maybe, but like Putin or Putin look-alike. So we may assume that the Russian political establishment has been working on some variant or scenario of power takeover, power transition. And actually, Mishustin or Peskov show in their statements and in their acts that they are rather for the second option, more repression, more war, more state in the economy. And right now we will have to follow up the situation to see which option will prevail and determine the future. Those who represent law enforcement services or secret services and so-called liberals, the Ministry of Finance and the Central Bank, these people would be rather for the first option. The Central Bank of Russia and the Russian Ministry of Finance both make a major contribution to the Russian war effort, at least larger contribution than the Ministry of War. Is the glass half full or half empty? I don't know. It's true that the Russian economy has greatly suffered from sanctions, but the sanction regime is meaningful only when it's cartel-based. In other words, when everybody is involved. And right now, because not everybody is involved, sanctions are not fully effective. India or China are not involved in the sanction regime, and that is why it is not effective. Plus, the size of the Russian economy is big enough for Russia to find other outlets. It's true, we know that Russian foreign currency reserves have been shrinking, but paradoxically, the reserves which have been blocked because of sanctions will be saved. Those which have been frozen in the West, in gold or in the US dollar. Right now, they cannot be seized, and others are kept in yuan or in rupias. But you still can use these reserves to buy goods. The number of people living in poverty has been growing in Russia, but the more poor people you have, the more volunteers you have who are ready to be drafted to the army. We know that every society has some appetite for risk, and we don't know where this Russian appetite for risk or the appetite for risk in the Russian society will stop. From today's perspective, it is very probable that this appetite will still be there for long. Soldiers, Russian soldiers, for instance, a new legal framework entered into force, under which the age of drafting has been lowered. 300,000 were mobilized last year. This year, with the lower drafting age, they would do that easily under the standard procedure. So, as you see, there is no clear-cut answers, but I would assume that Russia will be ready to have a long-term war.
Thank you very much. In fact, two important things have been mentioned. The most important one from our perspective is not to believe the illusion of liberals who are taking over the power in Russia. They will not be complying with expectations of Western countries, but maybe we'll discuss it in the second part related to forecasts. Now I would like to ask Mr. Krzysztof Strachota. Krzysztof, an important player that isn't mentioned often by us, is important on the map. It's engaged both in Ukraine and in the Middle East, like in Russia itself. I mean, Turkey. I think this is an important question, taking into consideration the fact that Turkey is our ally in NATO. How do you think, what will be Turkish politics towards Ukraine, but also Russia and countries in the region and the Middle East? What are the most important goals in their politics? Because I will ask about Southern Caucasus later on. Thank you very much for the possibility of participating in this panel. I will start my intervention by stating that while speaking about Turkish expectations, we shouldn't be saying that this is a black and white situation, something is against us or in favor of us, which is a very... Turkey is a country of huge ambitions and huge possibilities, which is very much accentuated in the Polish discourse. We should leave this opinion. Turkey in front of Ukraine's conflict and Middle East conflict is very defensive. They just want to survive. Both conflicts generated huge threats, strategic threats for Turkey. So, as far as the Ukrainian conflict is concerned, this is the risk of the change of strategic powers in the Black Sea basin. And the second conflict, this is also the risk for this economic cooperation Turkey has had with Russia. And there's a consequences for economic relationships with other countries of the Black Sea region. So Turkey wants to keep their own politics by leading bilateral politics, close relationships with Ukraine and close relationships with Russia. To be a strategic partner to Russia, as we have a look at the scale of international cooperation and political contacts that Putin has with Erdogan, and they are uncomparable with anything else, means that this is a good relationship with Russia. On the other hand, Turkey is ally of NATO, agrees with their goals, with their assumptions, accepts integrity, Ukrainian integrity, and also gives aid, military and other kinds of aid. For example, equipment aid, military equipment aid, or cereals pact with Ukraine, etc., etc. So let me repeat, as far as strategic questions are concerned, is to survive, is not to be involved in the conflict, not to be able to be the leader of the country, and to be able to not to be losing, being one part of the conflict and not another. So they are negotiating cooperation with all sides of the conflicts. We can see it, for example, when we look at the gas cooperation with Russia, nuclear power station Russia built in Turkey, the use of equity, of Russian equity that was in Turkey, using this equity for the Turkish campaign that was carried out in May this year. What's important as far as Turkish politics is concerned, both in the aspect of these conflicts, is this problem of their position, because Turkey isn't like a full-righted member of Europe. And as far as Gaza Strip is concerned, Turkey is expected to take decisions that it hasn't taken, and it is being marginalized politically, for example, in all the relationships with the European Union, and their fundamental security needs are being minimalized, marginalized. For example, the Kurds issue, because as it's to the rule, it is they have an anti-Turkish attitude, and we also had this military putsch. Turkey was excluded from F-35 program, and the United States prevents Turkey from buying F-16 fighters. That's why Turkey isn't treated seriously by the Western countries. For example, they don't want to help them as far as sanctions are concerned, or they don't want to help them improve their conditions because of their position. And this is one of the needs why Turkey is maintaining itself distant. On the other hand, Turkish are saying openly that they don't believe a quick victory of the West, or they totally don't believe in Ukrainians' victory. So once again, they want to keep as separated from the conflict as possible. As far as the Middle East situation is concerned, I wouldn't look at this from the perspective of the Turkish president's interventions, but I would have a look at this through strategic interest. The Gaza Strip, to which Israel and the United States is being engaged, and we have the threat of the expansion of this conflict to the Middle East. It's been 1.5 months that it started, and the perspective that the Iran or the Persian Gulf countries will be involved is still possible. And what Turkey is doing is to threat away both Israel and these Arabic countries from the conflict. Turkey has survived the Spring War and other conflicts. So, shaking of Turkish economy or energy market because of the conflict in the Middle East would be catastrophic for Turkey. That's why being distant from Israel, from the United States, has to do with keeping the threat away and the possible escalation away. And in a day-to-day life, the reality is multidimensional. The Turkey isn't playing like in the first league, isn't the most important country, but it has potential to be so. That's why Turkey is ambitious, active, passive, threatened, multidimensional. That is our ally on one hand, as I'm saying, active, but also passive. But on the other hand, with a very negative attitude towards Western countries, that the country doesn't look for alternatives. Thank you very much. Thank you. And the last question, last but not least, to Tomasz Orłowski. I would like to ask you about Poland in this context. In your opinion, what's the evaluation of the Ukrainian situation broader in the context of the Polish security? And how we, as the country, where is the biggest threat for us and for our allies? Thank you very much for this question. I would like to start with two topics. Started with previous speakers. The first one is this long duration of Russian aggression against Ukraine. What Mr. Professor mentioned in his intervention. This is the biggest risk, the biggest variable that influences our diplomatic actions, and this is the main factor that makes us modify or not to modify some actions that we have been carrying out for some time. We don't intensify them. The fact that this war can last a long time has been discussed for a long time in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. The first counter-offensive actions in the first half of this year in Ukraine made us think that we need to be prepared for a long conflict in preventing Russia and in the long prevention of Russia and international aid for Ukraine. Of course, this is a challenge because of all the elements that we are discussing today. So a prolonged warfare, and each prolonged warfare is losing its media intensity at some point. And some social and political intensity is also lost. Please keep in mind what was going on when we had war in Syria 8 or 10 years ago in the context of media. I was witnessing this slow decrease of interest of public opinion in the West and Western media about this war, let's let's keep in mind what happened during the Libya conflict that hasn't been politically finished till today, actually. So this entire set of risks, this is how I would call it, makes us prepare in our diplomacy sector to engage Polish diplomacy for long term in the aspect of supporting Ukraine and organizing ourselves in this context, mainly by preparing teams that would carry out a public classical diplomacy, media diplomacy that helps us maintain all the Eastern questions high on the international agenda, especially Russia's aggression on Ukraine. So far, the Israeli-Hamas war hasn't pushed back Ukrainian conflict from international agenda thoroughly. So we are not facing such a threat. The Council for International Affairs, the Council of the European Union for International Affairs, was discussing these two topics during the last session, and what's important, the Middle East topic was the first one on the agenda prior to Ukrainian conflict, which was unprecedented because, as you know, Ukrainian conflict is being discussed on a regular basis each month, which is also a phenomenon in the history of the European Union. Here we are facing kind of shift, but I feel that we are not being threatened by a complete omittance of Ukrainian topic from European Union agendas because of two factors. First of all, enormous and strategic engagement of people who are deciding at the moment about politics in the arm of the European Union, Madame Ursula von der Leyen or Joseph Borrell, who are deciding about Ukrainians' conflict and its aid, Mr. Joseph is engaged very much into this conflict. This is a guarantee that this topic will be still present on the European agenda. And on the other hand, we have to fix a very urgent issue with Ukraine. The procedure of accession of Ukraine to the European Union, because the moods are very good, so expectations are high, substantial evaluations are decent. Let me put it this way. So we have really a great chance that we will manage to do it by the end of December, of the half of December of this year. Thanks to this, the Ukrainian topic will not disappear from the European Union agenda. And the second factor is the engagement of the United States, the engagement that undoubtedly the engagement of the US into the conflict in the Middle East is a threat for the Ukrainian conflict. But when Democrats and Mr. Biden are engaged so much into Ukrainian conflict, or they have been engaged so much so far, we are not facing the risk of a complete marginalization of Ukrainian conflict. So to sum up, the situation isn't catastrophic. Nonetheless, we, the diplomats, we need to take care about the fact that the war that is taking place just behind our border is in the very center of the engagement and interest of the entire world. Of course, this is also the question to you who are more specialized into the Middle East topics, how fast this war how fast it can be completed. because the perspective of a short term or middle term of its duration would be also important for our discussion as far as the future is being concerned. Thank you very much.
Tak jak
Yeah, you actually predicted what I was going to ask about. Let me move to some practical issues, and I will follow up on what you've just mentioned. Let me start, Adam, with what you said about the US. There are real elections. They are elections. You know, we have elections in Russia next year, and we have the actual elections in the US. Do you think there is a risk that the US will not be able to manage its support in two conflicts at the same time? The Middle East and in Ukraine. Let's not forget about Taiwan as well. And regarding Ukraine itself, you've all mentioned a number of risks to be tackled by Ukraine: population risk, economic risk, military risk. But is there an opportunity or a chance that Ukraine will eventually sit at the negotiation table with Russia? Adam, let me start with the American aid to Ukraine. At present, the Ukrainian budget, half of the Ukrainian budget is spent on defense. So the next year, the infrastructure spending will be cut down, and this will be mainly a military budget, an effort budget with a huge effort on defense. And the 50% of the budget spent on defense amounts to the Ukrainian budget deficit. In other words, Ukraine would need to get like $50 billion next year to fill in the gaps. Just have a look at the statistics regarding the aid to Ukraine over the last 2 years. Around $75 billion were either already sent or announced as the future aid by the US. Some part of this money has already been transferred. And add to that the assistance from the European Union and the European institutions and the European countries. And if you compare the amounts, you will see a major difference. The American support is mainly the military support with the supplies of military equipment. Europe, however, is unable to provide such military aid. We do not have such capabilities. Indeed, million munitions to be transferred to Ukraine. That was an idea to send the munitions of that kind or of that size. Only the US have the necessary military and technology capabilities to provide such aid. I believe that the US will be able to provide support equally to Israel and to Ukraine. As for Taiwan, the risk is mitigated. We've had a meeting, the APEC meeting, and the meeting between Biden and Xi Jinping. China is less interested in any escalation in that region, especially that right now it's tackling some political internal issues. Xi right now is working on his internal position, and any conflict with the US would not be of service to him. Is there a political will That would be my next question, especially in the light of the incoming presidential election. Well, the victory of Trump would be the worst case scenario for Ukraine, and I would like to discuss that. Ukraine, without any American support, would not be able to keep the front line with Russia as it is. Let's not forget that the support has eroded in the society. The US always signpost the direction for other countries. If there is a withdrawal of the US, there will be more and more sentiment in Europe that the negotiations need to be started. And let me now move to the Ukrainian home policy. I've already said that Ukraine right now has to cope with some internal political dynamics and divides plus economic crisis, and these tensions may become even more visible in the context of war. And let us not forget that the population challenge in Ukraine has become more apparent those days. It's a desert country. Millions of people left the country. A lot of them are at the front line. The streets are empty, either because the soldiers are fighting on the front line, others will not go into the street afraid of being drafted into the armed forces. There are others who left the country and work, for instance, in Poland. And actually, this is a major population crisis, and the Ukrainian authorities some years ago decided not to have a new national census in order to avoid this discovery that there is no longer a Ukrainian nation of 60 million people. Now the age pyramid is reversed, and there is the aging of Ukrainian society, so an increase in social welfare spending, less people, less working population. Our institute, Warsaw Enterprise Institute, established a branch in Ukraine. We wanted to be close to people, to work closely with people, to know the reality in the field, even in some remote regions. And we worked closely with the governors of those regions. And, you know, there are some sort of a happiness index prepared for specific Ukrainian regions. And in the West, Transcarpathian regions actually are considered to be the happiest ones, not struck by war, with a small number of internally displaced people. And the governor says, listen, we are not happy because we have not enough workforce to make the economy prosper. The mayor of Vinnytsia told me like 1 or 2 months ago, we got the letter from the drafting committee, and they asked us to take the staff of our municipal transport company and to send them to the front line. You know, in a year we will just be a population of women only, and women will be the only drivers of our trams, municipal trams and buses, because there will be no other men. And the Ukrainian state will no longer be able to provide basic public services. So, if the outcome of the war is bad for Ukraine, with a tough compromise and some concessions in favor of Russia imposed by the West, if there is some home crisis or some deep internal divide, and if the this war of aggression turns into some tough, acrimonious internal clashes, we may witness a new wave of people leaving Ukraine. I'm not talking about the wild, empty fields, desert, empty fields. And no, that's not what I mean. I mean that actually Ukraine needs to start to work on its new population or migration policy to attract people from Africa, from Central Asia, from Southeast Asia, to fill in the demographic gap. This will be a major hurdle for any recovery or modernization of the post-war Ukrainian state. Thank you very much. The picture you're painting is quite gloomy. We can be optimistic, we can be pessimistic. I will try to follow on it in my own summary of the debate. Now let me move to Ambassador Kozłowski. What do you think is the perspective of war in the Middle East? How long, and is there a chance that there will be a spillover effect across the whole region? And what are the expectations of Netanyahu? One of my colleagues, a specialist in the Middle East, told me that Netanyahu would like to have a long conflict because he wants to avoid any criminal sanctions. Do you also think, Ambassador, that there may be a shift in the Israelis' policy towards Ukraine and towards Poland in this context? Well, let me start with the following saying. After the destruction of the Second Temple, there are no prophets in Israel. That's what Israeli people would say. So because there are no prophets in Israel, it is really hard to judge. Some said at the time that there will be no war between Ukraine and Russia. And they were wrong. As for the Middle East, I don't think there could be a larger spillover effect in the region. Only Russia would like to have such a spillover effect. No other actor would like to have it. The major force behind the conflict, Iran, has already achieved the goal. There are no Abraham Accords between the Saudi Arabian authorities and Israeli. The Abraham Accords have been frozen or suspended. So Iran has achieved its goals, and there are discussions underway between Iran and Saudi Arabia, a thing unimaginable some months ago only. Iran is not interested in such a spillover effect, and the Northern Front would be the only one. So the attack from Hezbollah against Israel would be the only door to such spillover effect. Russia is the only country interested in such an escalation. And actually there are Russian traces, at least at the beginnings of the conflict. However, this is not a true power in the Middle East. At least Russia has not enough power in the Middle East to put in motion any larger military operation. Russia has no direct influence on Hezbollah, and its influence in Syria has been shrinking, I reckon. So I think that apart from a limited support to some radical groups, Russia will not be able to trigger any major conflict. However, there is a threat, a major threat in the region. Over the last 50 years, we saw how the irrational prevailed over the rational. We had the ISIS, where there were no reasonable expectations. It could not be reasonably predicted. So we may see the emergence of such forces as well. However, let's look at the West Bank. Here, the actions may intensify, And Israel may become even more radicalized. So instead of the Gaza Strip or the northern front, we may have tensions flaring up in the West Bank. We know what's the situation between the Israeli settlers and the Palestinians. Actually, 2 days ago, President Biden made quite a sharp sentence, a statement. Sharp, considering the state of relations between Israel and the US. But if there is some escalation in the West Bank, that would not be a full-scale military operation, but rather some type of conflict. Military effort and military operation in the Gaza Strip is coming to an end, I believe. There will be yet another frozen conflict of a type liked by Russia. Israel will have to occupy Gaza. There is no other country volunteering to do that. And Hamas will become a clandestine organization under the ground, literally and figuratively. It will attack military troops in the Gaza Strip. So there is a kind of hidden conflict, but this conflict has been present and in a way implicit for long, and we will come back then to the situation from before 2005, a sort of a hidden, stifled conflict in the Gaza Strip, in the West Bank, and this sort of a state of tension without any full-scale operation is piece and parcel of the Iranian policy for years. So sort of shootings and provocations at the Israeli and Lebanese border. That's how it is. Let me just mention two more things. One of the panelists said that the conflict has an impact on the situation, internal dynamics in the US, saying that the conflict in the Middle East may, in a way, shape the future presidential election. This is extremely dangerous to the incumbent American administration. The left-oriented groups are actually the main electoral base of the Democratic Party in the US. And right now, the anti-Israeli sentiment is strong in this group. Actually, these people are not numerous, but they are socially visible and present in the public debate, and they are actually influential in the large sections of American people, especially Black and Latino communities. And that may be extremely prejudicial to the Democrats. That is, it is in the interest of the US to calm down the situation in the Middle East as quickly as possible. And actually, nearly over the night, the visit of the President of the United States was organized, and actually he was refused the entry to Jordan, which is not a usual thing. It's actually an extraordinary thing. So the situation should be managed quickly, and with that, the Americans may, in a way, mitigate the negative effects of the Middle East conflict on their politics and on the war in Ukraine and the situation of Ukraine, mitigate or reduce the effects of that conflict. I think we should be optimistic, but a lot will depend on the internal developments in Israel. We'll have to see if democratic forces in Israel will be able to push away the radicals. And actually the radicals in Israel are the ones who'd like to the conflict to persist. And now we just simply need to watch and see. Thank you.
Thank you very much also for this grain of optimism. Now I would like to ask Professor Marciniak. Russia has just been mentioned, so let's ask what will be the Russian politics in the broader sense, because the Middle East conflict shows us that Russia is trying to activate anti-Western coalitions very much. So I don't want to say that, I don't want to have such a feeling that in this panel we say that this country is totally isolated, because it isn't. We need to have a look how it will influence Russian politics. And the second question is something that you've mentioned to some extent in the first part, but is Russia really ready for a long-term conflict? And is Russia... What will be the Russian politics towards Western countries, NATO countries, that in line with Russian elite is saying, Russia is remaining in the state of war. Mr. Ambassador has mentioned that, generally speaking, we don't have any base to forecast the Gaza conflict spreading into entire Middle East. So such geopolitical advantages Russia will not have in the face of the conflict that actually is not scaling up. If it was scaling up, that we could speak about advantages. We are often mentioning that what's advantageous for Russia is to redirect the public opinion and analytics engagement into the Middle East, and the engagement of the United States too, so that it will be so that their interest will be lower as far as Ukraine aid to Ukraine is concerned. But let me remind you one thing. I've gone through data on the scale of financing of war by Russia and by Ukraine for the first half of this year. So Ukraine mostly taking profits from external aid is spending around $7 billion, while Russia $30 billion. So this is a huge financial difference. Generally speaking, this is not money that is fighting, but armament. However, the history of wars shows us that the more money, the more financial sources we have, the more likely we win the war. And financial sources mean that we have more other resources that we can purchase. So I don't think, it's not likely that because of the Middle East conflict, the aid of the United States, of the Rammstein group would shrink. The aid for Ukraine would shrink, would decrease. Maybe it won't increase in a substantive way. However, nobody was planning to double the amount of this aid. So even if we assume that half of these 30 billion that Russia spends is put apart, we still have a huge difference between financing in Russia and Ukraine. So I don't see any direct profits in this scope, especially as we haven't faced a serious earthquake. Some were saying, or some were afraid that might China would profit this situation in order to take actions against Taiwan, to take over Taiwan, as this was being discussed internationally. But we had a meeting of President Biden and President of Taiwan, and we have the signals that it will not happen. Well, it is said that it was the meeting with the Chinese president. So in China, it is said the first date doesn't mean anything. So maybe these conclusions are too quick. However, we think that China won't take any military actions, at least before the Taiwanese elections. That might be especially taking into consideration Chinese People's Party. However, there are some direct serious consequences for Russia. For example, the question of Islam in Russia, the Dagestan's events might be and some excess. However, we may see that the Islam society or Islamic groups are being activated everywhere, and they are also present in Russia. The Kirer, the patriarch that is responsible for a certain ministry, was worried about the development of competition. He said the migrants' influx from the Central Asia is threatening our identity. And the Moscow representative told him, "But what is your identity? So what's your point?" So as far as Islamic Street is convinced, they have a certain identity. And the chief value of the Russian Federation is, what is this? Money and the cult of money. So in this conflict, this is Islam that is winning spiritually, of course. So that's a problem. So this effect is positive for Russia because the political situation is being put apart, or more broadly in the West. And because of the left-wing radical campaigns against Israel. So the chief motto of this campaign is ceasefire. But the ceasefire in the Gaza Strip is being mentioned by the same people who are promoting ceasefire in the Russian-Ukrainian conflict. For Russian establishment, it may be favorable at the moment from the point of view of the procedure that I've said. The voting for the prolongation of plenipotentiaries for Putin, whoever he is. I am relating to Pieskov's words. And now let's speak about goals, not only today's goals, but also long-term ones, because the war goals. I've already mentioned a little bit. The avoidance of punishment and the fear of retribution is a perspective goal, I would say. I think that we need to keep in mind that war in Ukraine for the governing group in Russia is a kind of replacement conflict. Because the first conflict is the war with the West, which was declared very firmly even before starting the warfare in January 2022. We had this tweet of the foreign minister, NATO, take your belongings and go behind the line of 1997. So the goal is very clear. So if we contrast it with the with the system of values, of socioeconomic values, is that division of the areas. We take the part on one part of the river, and territories behind the river. So this is the territory of the war, and the West doesn't show they're willing to address this conflict. So this was Brezhnev and Nixon who were already discussing this division, Brezhnev with Bush, and it has never seen any result. But on the other hand, this war is secondary for the Russian society. It's kind of euphemism. Let's imagine that you behave like Ukrainians. You will see what will happen. The fear is a very important impulse for human behavior. And this is the criterion thanks to which people perceive reality in a certain way. I think they don't have any illusions about who's ruling Russia. But the Russians are like Gaza inhabitants. They are the victims, they are hostages of the conflict, and they need to adjust to this ruling group because this is the war for domination, the war for power. Domination on the world scale and domination inside a country is convergent. So international domination legitimizes dominance gives the title to power. So Putin is trying to get advantage in this conflict, and I think he is overcoming already material, substantial obstacles like sanctions, like poverty. These are costs of entire operation. But the stake is so high that these costs are worth being paid. And I would like to remind you the figures that I've already given you. Russians are still able to get big amounts of money to carry out warfare. For the moment being, this money is bigger than Ukraine, and this is the poorest point. This is the weakest point of Ukraine because Ukraine is getting this money from abroad, is dependent on support from abroad. And in the future, it might change. It is due to some factors, some variables, limitations, etc. Thank you.
Pytanie znów.
Krzysztof, let me come back to Turkey. You discussed Turkish goals and you said that Turkey's objective is simply to survive. And now let us move to Nagorno-Karabakh and the South Caucasus and Azerbaijan. Do you think that Azerbaijan will still have the full support from Turkey? And there is one nation, two states policy. Maybe Turkey will change its views and would like to have more influence in Central Asia, in the South Caucasus. And do you think that the Turkish-Russian relations will still be shaped by the same factors? But by that I mean the personal relationship between both presidents. And do you think it will have an impact on the NATO policy? F-35 program, Turkey was supposed to be expelled from the F-35 program. There were all the reservations regarding Turkey within NATO. Do you think there will be some more of that, some more actions of that kind? I do not see an alternative to the existing Russian-Turkish model. On the one hand, we have a strategic rivalry, and that means Turkey or Russia, respectively, wish to have a strategic advantage over the partner. And regarding the South Caucasus, Russia is losing. Turkey right now has an upper hand in the South Caucasus. This is not a full success. Russia's influence cannot be fully discarded. So there is a strategic rivalry on the one hand between the two states. On the other hand, there is some kind of cooperation, and this cooperation will be maintained. And Turkey does not have an option and does not wish to skip it. Turkey needs a predictable and stable Russia with a steady flow of money, Russian money. That's what Turkey needs. Ankara also cares for its links with the West. There are clashes, important clashes, and there is a very, very high level of emotions. But Turkey would like to stick to the West. However, its expectation needs to be met by the West. And Turkey, I believe, needs from the West some understanding of its own geopolitical and economic interests. Without that understanding, there will be more and more distance between the West and Turkey, and that is how the Turkey may become even closer to Russia. And I do not mean a sort of a new institutional cooperation. No, there are two rivals. Russia and Turkey are two rivals, and presidents are two rivals. But they are marching the same street, and they want to survive. So the condition of the Western-Turkish relations will be determinant for the dynamics in the Turkish-Russian relations. South Caucasus now. This is quite complicated. Turkey is extremely strong in the region, and Turkey was able to show that it's able to break the monopoly, Russian monopoly, able to win the conflict and change or transform Azerbaijan into a modernized country with a modern armed forces and modern administration. This is the success of Turkey. And actually, Azerbaijan is actually dependent on Turkey, and the Western presence in the South Caucasus is dependent on Turkey. So these are the self-explaining successes. However, Turkey uses a self-restraining mechanism in order to prevent any conflict with Russia. And after the war in Nagorno-Karabakh in 2020, we saw that self-restraining mechanism in action, and we saw it right now during this conflict. Turkey would support Azerbaijan. However, Azerbaijan would turn to Russia for political solution and peace solution. And Russia usually is ready to tolerate this state of play, provided that it is still officially considered as a winner in the whole Caucasus region. Does Turkey really support Azerbaijan in its claims against Armenia, especially the extraterritorial transportation corridor going through Armenia? Will Turkey also support any military action by Azerbaijan? Well, let's make an assumption that Azerbaijan invades Armenia. The West would impose sanctions, and Turkey would probably not be ready to pay such price. It would hit Turkey either directly or indirectly. So Turkey will make pressure, will support Azerbaijan, provided that this is not a military action. Russia would be the instigator. Russia would be an instigator to such military action, not Turkey. And what's the position of Western countries? Right now, Turkey is being pushed away by the European Union and is no longer involved in any political process managed by the EU or by the US. And Turks just got frustrated, and the peace process organized by the EU and by the US got stuck. And right now, Turkey is facing a dilemma. They do not want us. France says that that they are the power in Caucasus, and they don't want us there. And that is why Turkey may be more willing to look to Moscow. And it's not a strategic alliance, it's simply a sort of a closer cooperation that I see on the horizon. So just telling that to say that the stance of the Western country is extremely important here. Well, we need to rethink the way we ally with, liaise with Turkey. Otherwise, Turkey will drift towards Moscow. I don't know if I answer your question. Tomek, last but not least, I have a question about Poland and the future of our assistance to Ukraine and our mutual relations. The topic was touched upon in the opening speeches, but let us now think in futuristic terms. What happens once Ukraine sits at the negotiation table with Russia? Will anything change? And what are we going to do within international organizations? In the EU, in NATO? Well, we've made a number of statements. We've had a number of statements on Polish support to the Ukrainian accession to the EU, but we still have steps that may be taken within the United Nations. Let us not forget that the whole foreign policy, including support to Ukraine, is based on the declared official goal of Ukrainian authorities and society. And the goal is to defend the sovereignty and the freedom of Ukraine. This is also the vital interest of the Republic of Poland to have next to its door a free and independent Ukraine. And we support Ukraine through our short, mid and long-term measures. At some point, Ukrainian authorities may look for other paths and ways of ending this war. And if there is a change, we will respond and we will react. For now, I believe we should go somewhere beyond the diplomacy as such and think in terms of our vital interest. And the frozen Russian-Ukrainian war is not our vital interest. Our vital interest is to see Ukraine regaining as much of its territory as possible, if not the whole territorial integrity. That would be the definition of our vital interest. And in the light of this vital interest, we should have more of the same. More sanctions. Just need to go and review the sanctions or to see whether they worked or not, to see what kind of production segments can still be hit by some more specific sanctions, and take the decisions on new sanctions, or where there are gaps to be filled in. So we should also see how sanctions are bypassed by third countries. This is important for them to be more effective. The EU sanctions and the EU decisions are extremely important. We may assume that the accession process will be lengthy and will be time and work consuming. We know that from our experience, but the accession process is just one piece of the puzzle. We also need to be involved in the organization of financial and structural support, long-term support. Right now, this is managed under the new instrument, the Ukraine Support Facility, with 50 million euros of additional support. Diplomats are now working to strengthen this facility. There are some other wider actions possible. So OSCE path is actually blocked because everything is vetoed by Russia. So the OSCE for now does not work. However, we still have the UN family and the UN system. And here we can promote, together with our Ukrainian friends, a new peace initiative called the Peace Formula. For the outsiders, this is a sort of a maximum or idealistic plan for the future and for the peace proposed by Ukraine. This is a sort of a paternalistic thinking. This peace formula is a wide-ranging plan intended to get many countries involved in the peace process. I'm not talking only about the usual suspects. I mean, those countries usually give their support to Ukraine. I'm not talking only about the Western world. And the peace formula actually is supposed to bring together other countries, and it pays off as the number of countries from outside the classic democratic community is now growing, and these countries provide their support to the peace formula, and there are many plans being drafted under this peace formula. And this may be a stepping stone to something more solid, more robust, something the international community may need once we move to the reconstruction phase. The peace formula is a sort of a framework and a platform used by Ukrainian diplomacy and Western diplomacy to organize all the peace-seeking efforts. That's maximalist, that's definite. And there is yet another path I'd like to mention, and with two sub-parts or minor parts. So security guarantees. First, the G7 announced or tabled the offer of security guarantees during the NATO summit in Vilnius. We know that negotiations between allies are tough, but we have a summit in Washington in the next year with some major interesting developments regarding the future of Ukraine in NATO. But bilateral security guarantee, that's a solution that's been intensely discussed by many countries, and a number of countries have joined the G7, plus the EU was among the initial signatories of this declaration, and many are now working on putting some substance into this proposal of bilateral security guarantees. Well, we all want to propose a more substantive plan to Ukraine with some more specific security guarantees. Classic international law, alliance-based guarantees, but some far-reaching and forward-looking commitments as well. these actions have been already structured, but as Anna said, there are plenty of measures being taken by the UN to protect the national Ukrainian heritage damaged by Russian, to bring back home children abducted by Russians and expelled or taken away to the Russian Federation. There are plenty of efforts. Well, there are different people who would whine and complain, but I must say that there is a high level of mobilization among the international community for Ukraine, and this is not only about empty words. And I'd like to pay my respects to the Ukrainian diplomacy. They have limited resources, but they're extremely active and extremely effective and focused on positive mobilization. They raise the issue everywhere, and we should take note of it. And let me come back to your assumption, initial assumption. It would not be in our interest to see any shift in the diplomacy or in the military approach adopted by Ukraine. Until there is no shift, we do more of the same, and we stay active on the paths we've been active till today.
Thank you very much. According to our schedule, we should be finishing soon. However, we've started slightly late. That's why I will sacrifice this moment for you. Should you have any questions, please ask them now. Of course, I will come to you and I will bring microphone, but please first raise your hand if you want to ask a question to all of the speakers or particularly one. Hello, I'm Sub-Colonel Komorowski from the General Armed Forces. Thank you for the possibility to be here in this noble, with this noble people. I am working in military area that doesn't involve kinetic operation, but yes, in non-kinetic area. So I'd like to ask the member of the representative of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. In the Middle East region, we have 2 NATO missions. So because of the situation in the Middle East, is there any idea to change to replace these forces, to change the location? And the second question, as far as I know, there is a big group of Russian and Ukrainian group being in Israel. Are these people, these forces, and the relationship between them in Israel influence somehow the situation in the Middle East or relations in Ukraine? Whether the situation in Ukraine influences international relationships. Thank you. Does anyone have questions once I'm here? Because if I return to my seat, then it will be hard to ask the question. Well, as far as I know, I haven't heard about the change of status of UNIFIL in the second mission, but of course the situation is dynamic and will be evolving. So depending on the northern front line in Israel, whether it escalates or not, for the moment being, there is a decision to limit this front line with the border with Lebanon. However, of course, we don't know what future brings us. Mr. Ambassador? Yes, this is true. There are many Israeli citizens who are migrants from the Soviet Union or from Russia. So it's hard to say whether they are Russians because their identity isn't well defined. Or, for example, Ukrainians who left Ukraine in the 90s, were they more citizens of the Soviet Union or more Ukrainians? So, for the moment being, these environments didn't influence the situation much, especially as they are integrated into Israeli society very much. And usually these are very conservative groups, so they support the right-wing parties in Israel. They are kind of nationalists. But there is a problem with these immigrants because a lot of them aren't treated as Jews by the religion. Because to be treated as a Jew, one has to have a mother who is Jewish, but many of them are Jews in the third or fourth generation. So they are facing a kind of conflict with religious establishment, for example, marriages, funerals, etc. So I don't think that they have big influence on the situation. However, during the Israelis' history, the recent Israelis' history, we could see a situation when Israel was trying to keep a neutral position in the Russian-Ukrainian conflict. We remember Bennett's visit in Moscow. We remember a uniform denial to send armament to Ukraine. I think it's changing because the dynamics of the Middle East results in the fact that this evil axis drawn by President Biden and this necessity to be on one side or in favor of one side or another forces Israel to go towards the light and not the shadow. Let me put it this way. It's hard that Israel today supports Russia, that is an ally of Iran, which is the biggest existential threat to Israel. And one of the reasons why Israel was refusing help to Ukraine was the necessity to coordinate attacks on Iranian targets in Syria with Russia. Now these targets are being attacked without coordination with Russia, and many generals were saying this was just a pretext because many attacks can be carried out without its coordination with Russia. But it looks like that whether the war in the Middle East or in Ukraine prolongs, then Israel will be forced to stand with Ukraine in a more explicit form. And even if there is change of government, then Israel might help Ukraine militarily, which would be important because air protection armament, which is the most urgent military need of Ukraine, can be met and satisfied by Israel, which is one of the leaders in these military areas. After terrorist attacks of Hamas to Israel, President Zelensky wanted to visit Israel very much in order to do what's called in diplomacy the exchange of support. So on one hand, support Israel in the war against terrorism, but on the other, to force Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu to express the support for Ukraine in the Russian-Ukrainian conflict. It didn't happen. This visit wasn't able to be carried out. Israel wasn't interested in having such a visit. I think that this is not in the interest of Israel to increase the meaning of Russian-Ukrainian conflict and limiting the fact that they are very exceptional in the United States diplomacy. So it was received with kind of distance. But as Mr. Ambassador has said, that Israel with time will have to take a more pro-Ukrainian position. I think it won't be the function of Israelis politics, but Russians politics, because Russia, that has been maintaining warm relationships in the Middle East for many years, both with Israel and with Arabic countries, has played with just one card, supported only Arabic countries, because geopolitical idea won in Russia, just to destroy international peace after Cold War peace or state of peace that was present after the war. I think that Russia fought the conflict with the conflict and this strong position against Israel and being in favor of Arabic countries, the fight with American imperialism, this unipolar world of the United States will help Russia use a growing anti-Israeli sentiment in the Western Europe and anti-establishment moods in the Western countries. We've discussed it in the beginning of this debate. That's why Russia supports broadly, maybe not Hamas, but the Palestinians, the Arabic world, with very open denial to keep a warm relationship with Israel. Thank you very much. We are coming to the end of this panel. My role is to sum up this discussion. Well, this is a difficult task, but we can see that what will be challenge for the Polish politics, but also in the context of NATO or the European Union politics, is the question of a prolongation of conflicts, of Russian aggression on Ukraine, or even the prolonged conflict in the Middle East. We can see how important the elections in the United States will be. But I also think that political situation of our EU partners will also influence different solutions. And it will be very important from the Polish security point of view that the next year's NATO summit in Washington will be. Thank you very much for this discussion. Thank you, participants. It was a very fruitful discussion. Thanks you, translators. And now I would like to give the floor to Director Malicki. Yes, thank you very much. I would like to thank the participants very much. I agree that it was a very interesting perception that broadened up our interests that were part of Warsaw Conference during previous 4 editions. But as I've said, something has happened, something has changed during last months. And I think that this broader perspective was an obligation. Nonetheless, regardless of your discussion, because I don't discuss with such excellent specialists, I personally think that this war will be of huge importance in the perspective. It will have a huge importance for the Russian-Ukrainian conflict. In the perspective of several months, we will witness it. Of course, Moscow and its allies, but now we are talking about Moscow. Moscow is not successful in all its activities. However, when we usually look at the history of the Soviet Union and Russian Federation, we can see that some of their actions are successful. And in my opinion, this part will have a very strong impact on the war, and it already has had this impact on the war and external possibilities of functioning of Ukraine, as well as possibilities of functioning of Ukrainian diplomacy that Mr. Orłowski has mentioned, specific sharp actions of diplomacy, but the times are sharp, are facing the war. So we all know that very well. And I think that all of us know that some achievements, some ways of acting will turn out to be insufficient, or just they won't be powerful in the nearest future.
Well, I've just said that the fifth review conference has some typical components. Its typical components, as every edition of the Permanent Working Review Conference, Minister Emilewicz made a speech about the state of play, plus the report by Warsaw Enterprise Institute has been presented. And along with this typical component, we had a novelty, a round table on the developments in the Middle East, which we believe will have a major impact on our future. During the previous sessions, the first, second, third, and fourth focused mainly, if not only, on our key goal, that is the analysis of aid and assistance provided to Ukraine, assistance in kind or in cash, humanitarian aid, medical supplies, military assistance. The fourth editions also touched upon the issues concerning refugees, mainly Ukrainian refugees staying in Poland. We had such topics on the agenda. And I mentioned refugees today, and I mentioned them in the summary of the previous sessions, the fourth working review conference. And as I said, I have at least 7 key conclusions in the answer to the question why so many millions of Ukrainians landed in Poland and were helped by Poland. Just to officially end this review conference, I would like to thank everybody, all the panelists and all the speakers today. I'd like to thank interpreters. They are really, they always have a really tough job. They are true professionals, but the job is never easy with us, and we tend to forget that they're there, and we speed up, and just be careful the next time when pronouncing the words or using specific terminology. And finally, on behalf of Minister Kuchcinski, the Chief of Staff at the Prime Minister's office, I'd like to thank him through Minister Satkowski, who is representing him today. It's thanks to his efforts and commitment this conference has been organized since February 2023. And I'd like to thank all other people who are not visible, but without them this conference would not have taken place. And let me just end on a symbolic note. Since the very beginning, the conference is held in this beautiful room, named after Anna Walentynowicz, Polish hero. We have some outstanding panelists today, some outstanding speakers and former ambassadors. They are now more open, and then there are ambassadors in service that are less open when they give their statements, and let's hope there are some future ambassadors among us as well. To all those ambassadors, a great thank you as well. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for your attention. Thank you to all the speakers, panelists, and to our moderator, Anna Maria Diner. That would be the last item on the agenda of our meeting today. We still have a lunch ahead of us. Please feel invited. It's just the room next to the entrance